Following the success of Dracula and Frankenstein in 1931, Universal decided to get to work on another monster movie the following year, which again brought Boris Karloff to the spotlight to play yet another major horror icon. Unlike the first two Universal monsters, The Mummy isn't based on any novelized source material. Dracula had Bram Stoker to thank, and of course Frankenstein had Mary Shelley. Instead, the film is based on the real-life discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 and the supposed curse of the pharaohs, which became more of a widespread story after the deaths of some notable figures linked with the opening of the tomb of Tutankhamun. It's been debated for years whether there's any plausible evidence that legitimizes the curse, but most people just say it's down to coincidence. The story also bears some resemblance to a short story by Arthur Conan Doyle called The Ring of Thoth, which is the only form of literature comparable with the plot. But the only thing that really links the movie to Conan Doyle's short story is the Ring of Thoth name. It kind of sounds like the Scroll of Thoth, which is something they use in the movie, but really that's just based on the Book of the Dead, which was a text used in ancient Egypt in the form of a scroll, which was buried with ancient Egyptians because they believed it helped to retain the soul and carry them onto the afterlife. Karloff plays Imhotep, an Egyptian high priest buried alive for attempting to resurrect the princess Anck-Senamen using the Scroll of Thoth. The opening scene shows a team of archaeologists reviewing the recently discovered tomb of Imhotep and the Scroll of Thoth encased in a casket with the tomb. Edward von Sloan plays Dr. Muller, who delivers one of my all-time favourite movie lines.
Death, eternal punishment for anyone who opens this casket in the name of Amun-Ra.
But despite knowing of the consequences, one of the archaeologists inadvertently revives Imhotep after reading an extract from the scroll. Imhotep escapes, taking the scroll, and continues his mission to resurrect his lover thousands of years after his death. This guy's performance is amazing, by the way. I love that maniacal laugh. You truly do believe that dark forces have completely taken over his mind.
He went for a little walk.
When you think of killer mummies, you instantly think of a bandaged living corpse going around strangling people. But this ain't no Scooby-Doo show. This mummy's different. He walks around unwrapped and armed with a very impressive set of mannerisms for someone who's been dead for thousands of years. He really does manage to fool everyone. He even has a false identity under the cover name of Ardeth Bay. Totally convincing disguise if you ask me. Having discovered the location of the princess's tomb, he attempts to bring her body back to life, but fails in the process. He later discovers an attractive Egyptian woman who he believes to possess the soul of his former lover. He later attempts to kill her with the intention of mummifying her, resurrecting her body, and finally making her his immortal bride. Towards the latter half of the movie, there's a great flashback scene which shows Imhotep being wrapped up in bandages and buried alive. The slaves who buried his body are also killed to keep the burial completely secret. This part features an impaling scene, which is extremely graphic for a film from 1932, and may just be one of the first effective impaling scenes in cinematic history. Karloff's makeup is done none other by Jack Pierce, who also worked with Karloff in previous year, designing the makeup for Frankenstein's monster. For this film, Karloff's makeup took 8 hours to apply for each day of filming, during which Karloff had to keep completely still to let the makeup artist do his thing. Now here he is on set necking a cup of tea. Bless him. Even though we only really see a close-up shot of the mummy's face lasting for a few seconds, I'd say it was still completely worth the 8-hour days applying the makeup. The scene at the beginning of the film where Imhotep wakes up from his eternal slumber is done amazingly. Karloff moves incredibly slowly and unnaturally to really convince the audience that his body's been inactive for thousands of years. When he's walking around as Ardeth Bay, his physicality is so arched and rounded in the neck area, which gives the impression that he's only just readapting to being in his body again. He's also much taller than the rest of the cast, which only adds to the overall screen dominance. The film also uses the Swan Lake music at the start of the film, which is the exact same music they used to open the Dracula film the year before. What separates this film from the other Universal monsters is that it doesn't have any direct sequels, unless of course you count The Phantom of the Opera from 1943, which also doesn't have any sequels, But Universal did, however, come out with a few other mummy films during the 1940s, but those follow a different mummy and have a completely different tone in comparison to the 1932 classic. Overall, this one's a slow burner. It relies on atmosphere and the build-up to the conclusion, but that doesn't mean it isn't just as entertaining as the rest of the Universal monster flicks. The opening scene is great and the dialogue in this one is truly top-notch. The cast is also really good and gives some really incredible performances. Overall, I give it 10 sarcophagi out of 10. Thanks for watching.
You should have seen his face.